Hi, welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Assemblyman George Latimer. There's a debate going on all across America about the size and the role and the functions of government. And for those who work outside of the government structure, it all seems like one massive entity. But in fact, there are different levels of government with different structures and different purposes. Most of us think about what's happening at City Hall, Town Hall, or Village Hall. But our program today is going to talk about the role in New York State of county governments, Westchester County government in our area, but all throughout the state. Our guest today is Stephen Acquario, who's the Executive Director of the New York State Association of Counties, and arguably the most knowledgeable person about county government all across New York State. Steve, thanks for being with us today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
The question that comes up, and I spent 13 years in county government as a county legislator, but the question that comes up in my area, Steve, because Westchester borders Connecticut, and Connecticut has no county governments, is why do we need county government? So let me throw that hot potato to you. Why do we need county government? What does it do that justifies its existence?
Well, sure, it's a fair question, and I think we have to, when we look at government, let's look at government as a whole. Governor Cuomo has been known to say, what is government, what is its purpose? Well, it's a collection or an organization of people to do for others what people can't do for themselves. So if we take a look at what are the various levels of government, everybody knows what they are. We learn them in elementary school. You have the federal government. Let's visualize a cake, okay, if you will. Let's call the cake itself the states, or New York State. Let's put some frosting over the top of that cake, and let's call that the federal government. So the federal government, the state government, and let's call the swirl in between the cake the local governments. Who are they? Towns, cities, villages, and counties. Each one of these local governments, if you will, have a unique and special purpose. Each one of them have a long and historical and rich tradition in New York State in what's known as the New England tradition of local government. What is that type of government? Well, for counties, we have become and always were a regional government. What did we do back in the 16 and the 1700s? Well, we had taxing authority back in the 1700s that came from the King of England. The county of Westchester, Nassau, Richmond, Staten Island, the Bronx, all of the counties, Rockland, Nassau, Orange, and Ulster. You could see the names of these counties with the origins from England. So we had the authority to tax, and we always had the authority to monitor deeds and property. We needed somewhere to file the deeds, the county clerk. And in many counties across this state, there is a DMV, or motor vehicle function, in addition to tracking all the important legal documents for the courts, which the county clerks perform to this day. So we have a court function. We have traditionally had a public safety function. The counties run the correctional facilities. These are for individuals that are incarcerated or taken off our streets because they've committed a crime, and the counties are charged with that through local taxes to run the jail. We supervise on probation, we prosecute people, and we defend people. So we have the whole public safety function. In addition to that, as a regional government, we are forced to, or are mandated to, by the state to provide for health and human services. It's almost an invisible government. Most people don't know what a county does because they don't come in contact with a county service. But most people flush their toilet, most people drink water. Those services are running often through county facilities, and local revenues are used to fund those systems.
In the local government world, police, fire, protection, picking up your garbage, sanitation, cleaning snow off your roads, those are the things we see out of the city, the town, the village we live in. Probably when I was in Little League, since you're younger than me, you were probably in kindergarten, but in the mid-60s, something happened to explode the size and scope of county government. And I think you talked about it in terms of the health and the human services component. And it seemed that was the time frame in which the traditional county services, as you described, certainly the deed process, the county clerk process, DMV process, so forth, started to become a focus for the much greater social spending. Do you want to talk about that? Because what it really leads to is the decisions made in Albany to mandate what a county government does in New York that does not exist in Connecticut and does not exist in Pennsylvania the way it does in New York.
That's right. So let's look at today. Let's look at Westchester County government today. What is it? What are all these other counties in New York State doing and New York City doing today that they didn't do let's just pick a year, let's say 50 years ago, or 1950. Or 1960, as you say, in the mid-60s, something happened here that dramatically changed the role of county government. So today, Westchester County levels property tax. It essentially has two forms of revenue to fund its operations. What are they? Sales tax and property tax. Well, if we look at property tax, which is a very regressive tax, and in Westchester County's case, a very high tax in that area, it's used, about 90% of that collection of that property tax is used to fund and pay for 9 state-mandated services that the state of New York mandates the county to perform on its behalf. The largest of those programs is Medicaid. And if we look at what happened in Medicaid, and as you referred to, Assemblyman, in the 1960s, right around 1965, 1966, President Lyndon Johnson created a new program for the states. It was called Medicaid and Medicare. But in this instance, we're talking about Medicaid. And here we have a state like New York, unlike any of our border states, let alone any state in the United States at large, that requires county property taxes to fund Medicaid. It's just unsustainable. And I know that you know the figures in Westchester County, what it cost the taxpayers of Westchester to pay for its part of financing this system through property taxes. But there are other programs, child welfare programs, or assigned counsel, public assistance, temporary assistance to needy families, preschool special education and early intervention programs, youth detention programs. All of these programs alone cost the property taxpayers of New York State over $4 billion. And we have no say in how these programs are run. We're just simply told we need to make a contribution financially towards those systems. But let me just point out real quick. If we go back to the 1950s and before, and by the way, Westchester County was one of the first counties to have a county executive form of government, a very strong form of regional government in Westchester. But if we look at what were they doing traditionally, they were caring for their local needs with local revenues. What were we doing? Infrastructure, roads and bridges, economic development, promoting ways to grow jobs and keep people in our communities. We were providing hospitals and healthcare institutions, nursing homes. We had road patrol through police, as Westchester does, and the county sheriff's function of incarcerating people. We prosecuted the bad guys and we put them in the jails, all using local resources. Today, and there's a vast variety of quality of life programs, like the Parkland, for instance, that the county provides in Westchester. That is a quality of life program that the county has traditionally provided at Rye Playland for the residents of Westchester. But we're coming to a point now, 50, 60 years later, where the county government is unable to use local resources for local purposes. And there lies the tension between the mandates from Albany and the local community needs back home. And that's why we're seeing a lot of this stuff with a property tax cap. What does that mean? Why does Westchester County care about that tax cap? Of course, we all want to lower taxes, but without the mandate relief coming from Albany, a tax cap alone is going to really hurt local services.
When you have 3 or 4 things that are happening at the same time from the optic of the individual person who may be watching this at home in Rybrook or Larchmont, if they commute into the city, a lawyer perhaps, and they're in the financial services industry, if they're not using Medicaid, if they do not have a child of a certain age that's in need of supervision, if they are not dealing with a member of their family that's incarcerated, if they're not dealing with a need to get on a county bus system, that's not a mandated service, but a service provided in Westchester County, they don't see what the county government does. They do see that county taxes are 25% of their bill, more than municipal taxes, and of course school taxes being the greatest piece of this. But what they also don't see is that when we talk about reforming these things at the state level, 40% of New York State is New York City, which functions completely differently than the area outside of New York City. They don't have the property tax pressures because they have an income tax and they have a different level of services provided to people who live there who have a different expectation level of what those services are. So oftentimes those of us in Albany who represent suburban or upstate districts are fighting in Albany for interests that are suburban or upstate, but we deal with an urban group of legislators who don't have the same pressures and the same needs. So there's a generalization. You don't get it in Albany, Albany covering everybody who sits in some sort of leadership and responsibility. In terms of mandate relief, we've clearly identified that the cost that is paid by county governments to fund roughly 25% of the Medicaid costs is clearly the single largest state unfunded mandate. Just highlight, Steve, from your perspective, 2 or 3 other major state unfunded mandates that either have to be paid for by the state level or the counties have to be given the flexibility to deliver the service in their terms rather than in the state mandated terms.
Sure. If we look at what happened in the 1960s and what dramatically changed the role of county government, there were essentially 3 areas that happened back then. We've talked about one, Medicaid. The other one is defense of the indigent, or what's called assigned counsel. This is defense of the poor. People who can't afford a lawyer, one shall be provided for you. We all know that saying, right? Well, guess who pays for that in New York State? Those are the counties and their taxpayers that have to finance this system. It's huge. It's a $400 million program here, and it's run by the judiciary or the court system. We have no control over it other than to pay the bill. So those 2 things are major cost drivers. There are other ones that have to deal with early intervention and preschool special education programs. County governments over its history really never had a role in education. There was a time that we approved the education budgets of school districts, but that was 100 years ago or 80 years ago where counties were involved in that system. No county in New York State has an education department except for the city of New York. So why are county taxes used to pay for preschool special education? It makes no sense. It's not in the best interest of the child receiving the service. It's not in the best interest of the taxpayer because the level of government that's involved with making the decision isn't at the table. That's the county government. So special education programs, Medicaid programs, human services, safety, what's called the safety net. These are welfare programs or public assistance programs. These are the major cost drivers which the state of New York has to get a handle on its costs and stop pushing these costs back to the local governments, asking those taxpayers to pick up these expenditures without the control to improve these programs to help the recipients, the children or the people receiving the service, the child that gets in trouble and needs supervision or goes on probation, but we're not helping that child return to a productive member of society because we don't have the tools to do that. All we have to do is pay the dollar to provide for the cost of the care, but we're not doing the best job at doing that. And I think Albany has the keys to a lot of these answers.
There's so much more for us to discuss as we go through this, but we're just about out of time. Can I ask you to provide website information for our viewers so that they have an opportunity to know how they can look online and look at some of the prescriptives that NYSAC is talking about for the state of New York?
Certainly, you could reach us at the New York State Association of Counties. That's at www.nysac.org.
And we've been talking with Steve Aquaria, who's Executive Director of NYSAC, New York State Association of Counties, and many more issues to talk about, how we deal with transportation issues, how we deal with issues of homeland security, in which the county as a regional government is important. But we'll try to have you back in another program. And obviously, these are issues that affect not just Westchester County, but all across New York State. I'm Assemblyman George Latimer. Thanks for tuning in to Assembly Update. And if you need to reach us at our district office, 777-3832. Thanks for tuning in, and have a good day.